So next up, I'm very happy to introduce Professor Robert K. Kamai. He is a professor currently in the National University of Singapore, and he will share a lot more about his experience and his story in mental health literacy in education. So without much further ado, Professor Robert, I'll hand it over to you. Take a lead here.
Okay, thank you, Theodore. Okay, let me just get my slides up and let's see. So welcome everyone. I'm speaking to you from California. So I'm based in Singapore, but here on an extended trip to California. So greetings everyone, good morning. And just to introduce myself, as you heard, I am a professor at National University of Singapore. I'm a pediatrician. I take care of kids, trained to take care of kids. Before coming out to Singapore, I was at the University of California, San Francisco, and then was recruited 15 years ago to Singapore to help start Duke-NUS Medical School because my interest and my expertise is in education. And education, and this talk will be about how education and mental health are so intertwined. So I hope that I find that interesting. Now I got to know Anna, and Anna asked me to speak, and the team at Intellect asked me to speak because I teach a course at NUS on learning, how to learn better, the science of learning. So besides a pediatrician and knowing about medicine, I've also my career has been about medical education and the science of learning, how adults actually learn. So we had a course started at NUS. It was a small course, only a few people to start. And then this is a picture of us right before COVID. And then actually during COVID, our class was almost 1,000 students on Zoom because they're all interested in learning more about how you learn. And one of my favorite activities in the course is called Animal Farm. And so I'm going to have you do it. And just so you know that a reason why we did a lot of activities in the course is because a lot of the science of learning, a lot of it's counterintuitive. It doesn't really make complete sense. And so a lot of times students didn't believe what we had to say. So we put together a series of activities. And this is one of my favorite activities I thought I'd share with you. So what you need to do is you need to pay close attention. I'm going to show you a video and you need to pay close attention. And I'm going to be showing some animals, okay? And your task is to try to remember them as best you can, okay? No taking notes. This is just for fun, so it's not going to be graded or anything. But let's see how you do, okay? In terms of memory. Is everyone ready? Okay, here we go. So try to remember. Okay, that was it. Did everyone see it okay? Was that okay? I hope that you were able to see it with any problems. So I have three. This is a short talk. It covers, the course covers the whole semester, but I'm going to do just a little tidbits in 30 minutes. And this is what I want you to take away. I want you to really understand that students don't really understand, don't know effective evidence-based learning strategies. So I'll give you a little bit of a sense of what these strategies are. And these strategies don't work for everyone. They have to be individualized to the person and the setting. And that's important, especially as we talk about mental health issues. And then finally, the point that I've already made, I want to emphasize it, that learning and mental health issues are are closely intertwined. And that's so important to be thinking about in terms of learning in school. So as a pediatrician, as a physician, I knew that students, children, if they weren't healthy, or if they didn't had mental health issues and weren't healthy, they just weren't able to learn well. So you can imagine that's true with mental health issues, that learning success depends on being mentally healthy. And then when you look at some of the data that's really actually quite worrisome about college students and mental health issues, you know that they're legion. It's a major issue. And of course, this is not just college students, but this is young people in the workforce. And as they move through, as we get older, we have there's a lot of mental health issues that we have to be thinking about. But you can imagine, as their primary task in college is to learn, the mental health issues really affects how they learn. So this is an important part of learning, and we address it during our course. And for our students, I put together what I call the holistic learning framework. And it's because, as I mentioned, not every person, learning issues, strategies have to be individualized to the person and the person's priorities. And so having a framework, an approach to how to learn better is more important than me just telling you, these are the tips that you need to be able to do to learn better. So this is a drawing that represents the framework that I use to teach the course. You can see a cycle on the top. I'll talk about it, and it's put on two foundations. So to start off this holistic learning framework, at the very top, we talk about planning. And the first step of planning is having goals. Now, people really talk about having goals, but they really don't know how to make successful goals. And this is really not obvious how to make successful goals. And we work with our students really hard to make sure that they prioritize the goals that are important to them, not anyone else's goals. And really the hard part is not having goals, but to prioritize which ones are important. And then after they make goals as part of the plan, we give them a series of learning strategies that they need to be able to get to those goals. And this Animal Farm video, we'll return back to it, but it represents one of the learning strategies that I want you to know about. Then after they learn these strategies, then we give them advice in terms of how to implement. So knowing is only one part of it, but actually doing something with that knowledge is another huge step that most people don't pay attention to. And as a physician, we know that you could tell people about losing weight or whatever, but that doesn't mean they're going to do anything about it, or stopping smoking. So implementing is very, very hard. And so we spend time helping our students being able to implement that. And then the next step of the cycle is then they evaluate how well they did. So maybe at the end of the semester, they evaluate, did I improve with this strategy? And did I meet my goals? And then if they did or they didn't, then they readjust, they make better, harder goals, or they change the goals or change the strategies and start to plan again and again. And this is what we want our students to be able to do throughout their lifetimes, through work and their careers, being able to continue to adapt their learning strategies to cover what their important goals are and how they're doing. But and there's actually a lot of scientific evidence by just teaching students this cycle of where they evaluate their goals, give them strategies, and having them just think about thinking. And that's called metacognition. Just by thinking about thinking, people do better. So one of our professors at NUS, Patricia Chen, did this experiment where she divided a class into two, and she gave one half the class just ask them to reflect on the different resources that they used to study, how they were used and whether or not they were useful, and put together a study plan. It didn't really help them with the study plan. So this was just a very basic thing that she asked them to do. And these students who did that really scored better on their examinations. Here's the results of that study, where the darker lines are the grades. And you can see that the people who were asked just to think about thinking scored better in their grades. And it didn't take much to be able to do that. So that's the top of this of the holistic learning framework. But as a pediatrician, I also realized that you could be giving people study techniques and study tips, but unless they're on a solid foundation of two aspects. One, self-regulation, whereas, and that's a term for are they motivated to be able to study? So you can be given all sorts of study tips, but if you're not motivated to study, then you're not going to do well. Or that, you know, we're all procrastinators. We don't know how to deal with the procrastination. And then also just our mindset about learning and about thinking and about studying, that's also very important. And I'll return to mindsets a little bit later. But the other, of course, important that's relevant to this talk is the whole idea of health and well-being. That, as I mentioned, unless you're feeling healthy, both from a physical and mental health aspect, you're not going to be able to study well. So we cover that. So let's return to the Animal Farm Part 2 and a video. And for this, before you do this, I want you in the next couple of minutes, I'll give you 2 minutes, to write down the names of all the animals that you saw in that first video. So if you don't have a piece of paper, just pull out your phone, get a note, and start to type out the animals that you saw in that first video. Okay, so go ahead and get started. And I'll give you a couple minutes. And I see people chatting with me, and that's great. I'll take those chats at the end in a question and answer period of time. So just keep chatting, and I apologize if I don't get them right away because there's so much information I want to cover. But I'll get to them, I promise, at least I'll try to at the end of the talk. So another minute or so to write down all the names of the animals that you can remember from that first video. Okay, so please go ahead now. What I want you to do is put those answers aside, close that file, but you're going to go back to it in just a few minutes. So if you have a piece of paper and you wrote it down on a piece of paper, then just turn it upside down, don't refer to it. Or if you put it on your phone, which I'm guessing most of you did, then just put it aside. And we're going to see the second film. Okay, so in the second film, what your job is to do is to count how many new animals. I don't want you to count how many total animals there were. I want you to count how many animals you've not seen before in that first video. Okay? And here we go. Okay, that's it. Okay, hope that you counted the number of new videos. Okay, so we're gonna do a poll now. And for your poll, I want you to write down how many new animals did you see? Is everyone able to see those the poll answers?
Yep, we're able to see it.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, is everyone completed? We got 146. So no, 247 of you out there. Come on. Give you a few more minutes because I don't really want to take too much more time with this. So please enter your poll. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and end because I'm running. I know I'm going to be running out of time. I had a lot of stuff I want to share with you, but let's. So what you can see is that 5 was the average answer. Most people did 4, 5, and 6. Okay, that's great. Okay, and then till I close this. Okay, good. So now the next step, what I want you to do is I want you to pull out your list of animals that you wrote down and you remembered, that you can remember from that first video, okay? That either your phone or a piece of paper. And this is actually the pictures of the animals that you saw in that video. I want you to count how many of those animals you correctly remembered on your list, okay? Just count really quick how fast you, and then put in your poll how many that you correctly wrote down. Okay, so let's that's good. So it looks like you guys did really well. Between average is maybe, I'm just eyeballing this. Usually do this and pull everywhere, get a little bit more information, but I'm guessing 9 or 10 people did between 7 and 12. That's pretty good. Okay, so let's go on. I guess it says for me to share results. So okay, so let's move on. Okay, so the numbers that you wrote down, these are the number of animals that you recall, okay? And so let's talk a little bit about what happened. So how many animals were added? So our experience with our students is when we ask them, about 90% recognize that 5, the right answer is 5. So 90% of students did 4, 5, or 6. And that's probably close to what you guys did. Maybe you did a little bit better than our students. Good for you. And so, but let's think about what that means. It means that I showed you a picture of the animals, and only each animal was only a few seconds long. So in only a few seconds, almost everyone had in their heads the animals that they were seeing. So it's remarkable. They are able, just after a few seconds, the brain is able to remember the animals that you saw in a video. So that's because otherwise, that's the only way that you would be able to know which are the new ones. Okay. Okay. But when I ask you to recall them, typically our students cannot remember 14 or 15 of them. Okay, that's how many, 15 animals. They're not understanding 14 or 15. And most of our students get around 7 or 8 correct. And that you guys did even better than our NUS students. But still, it's not anything close to what you're able to recognize. So I want to separate the idea of recognition. Recognizing that you've seen an image before is not the same as then being able to recall it. okay? And when they studied this, here's a psychologist in the UK, showed 2 research instances over a weekend, 10,000 images. And after the first 612 pictures, they were at an incredibly high average, a 90% average. And then after 10,000, they were able to remember about 65% of them. So it's remarkable, the brain. So the brain's really good at recognizing things, but not necessarily recall them. And we witness this all the time in our everyday lives or in exams, when we say, I thought, how many of you went into exams? I thought I knew it, but I couldn't remember it. Or that word was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't remember it. And so because recognition is different than recall, the strategy of just reading it and then going back and then rereading it tends to reinforce that you can recognize it, but doesn't necessarily mean that you can recall it. They're different. And so this is a way to tell our students one of their most common strategies is to read something and then go back and read it again. And that doesn't really help, is not so effective in making this recall versus recognition. So that's just an example of a learning strategy that we'll teach our students during the course. And that's something that they might apply in their own learning. But as I said, this talk is mostly going to be about mental health issues and how and I already mentioned mental health has an effect on learning. And one of the things that we hear a lot from our students, when I ask my students, one of the things that they're really hard on themselves. They really talk bad about themselves. They're really harsh in the way they think about themselves and the way they treat themselves. And they have a lot of negative self-talk, is what it's called. And just imagine if you were learning how to ski and you weren't falling down at times, you are not going to learn skiing in an optimal way. If you are always so careful that you're not going to fall down, you're not going to learn how to ski in an optimal way. And it's true for the rest of learning too. You have to be able to fail. But if you're so negative with your self-talk, then you're going to really be demotivated, even more so when things don't work out. You just treat yourself bad. It's so bad, you just won't have the courage to try new things. You just want to be safe. You're not going to be asking questions because you're concerned, oh, is it going to be a stupid question, all these things. So this negative self-talk is really a challenge for our NUS students. We try to help them move to techniques to move from negative to positive self-talk. So that's another aspect of mental health that we use that's really important in terms of learning. So I talked about how mindsets in the foundation is also important. And mindsets, there's a lot of different mindsets. Okay, one mindset is the optimism and pessimism. Are you optimist or a pessimist? And I'm not going to ask this question because we're running close out of time. But just you could see that there's many different types of mindsets. If you're fearless or fearful, if you stay in the present, or you're future or past oriented, and then growth and fixed mindsets. That's a real common one that a lot of people have heard. That's really been well researched, and that's one that Ministry of Education in Singapore really has fixed on as well. Let's just move to that. So I think most people know that a growth mindset is the idea is that if you have a growth mindset, you're really saying to yourself, yes, I can learn something. I'm not fixed in terms of my intelligence, but my intelligence grows as I do the strategies that it takes for me to learn better. That when I'm challenged by something, it's not necessarily that I means that I'll never get it, but I'll work hard and I'll learn. So that is really will make me better. Versus a fixed mindset, of course, is that when you say, you know, I was not born very smart, and no matter what I do, I'm just always not going to do well in school. Okay, that's the fixed mindset. And it's clear that most people who have a growth mindset, it's been studied that if you have a growth mindset and you're working hard and studying, you do better than people who feel their intelligence is fixed. So a growth mindset person is going to say, I'm not yet achieve what I want, versus I'll never get there. So that's the mindset is another aspect of learning that we touch on in the class. Okay, And then another health aspect of learning that is probably the thing that affects learning the most for our students is this idea of sleep. Our students are terrible sleepers. They don't get enough sleep. And it's clear from a lot of research studies that show that when you deprive students of sleep, they don't learn well. Okay. In fact, this one amusing study shows that after being 24 hours awake, you're studying, trying to learn after being awake for 24 hours, it's the equivalent of being drunk. Okay, your abilities to learn. And the recommended amount of sleep at night for young adults and our students is between 7 to 9 hours a day, and most of our students don't get any close to that. So the misperception with this whole sleep and other aspects of their health is that if you continue to put effort into studying or doing whatever you want, you will perform better. So unfortunately, that is a misperception because what happens is you can actually overtrain. I know a sports psychologist who coaches Olympic athletes, and he says the hardest thing with Olympic athletes is not getting them motivated to train, but to keep them from overtraining and losing ground on their. So in fact, what happens is, with increase in effort, there's a period of time when then your performance goes down. It's been studied very carefully. And so, for instance, a lot of our students, they are overworking and they're not taking care of their mental and the physical self, and their effort doesn't relate into high performance. So as you can see, and I've done this really, really fast, there's a myriad of different factors that can influence learning success, many aspects of mental health and well-being impact on learning, and we try to touch on those during the course and give our students some of the skills necessary to be able for learning success. But one of the things that I found interesting that I wanted to present to you, I think it's obvious that if we deal with the mental health issues, we're going to learn better. But there's some evidence that dealing with learning, helping people be more successful at learning, actually can help their mental health. So here's a really interesting article where they use these techniques of learning and getting motivated to learn. And it seemed to help among medical students, and it seemed to help them deal with depression. And essentially what was going on with this particular study is that what they were saying is that the skills it takes to be able to develop a growth mindset, for instance, saying that I can learn and I can develop and I could be better, if applied to your personal life, not only the classroom, but your personal life, then those skills of being able to apply that growth mindset to your personal life can be helpful in terms of other aspects of mental health as well. So for instance, a growth mindset person might say, hey, I'm struggling with depression, but I know that there are things that I can do that can improve my mental health. Like I could take up swimming or running, or I could start meditating. I just haven't found what it takes to be able to help me with deal with my depression. Or I know that this is a challenge and I will accept help for this. Or I know that I'll have good days and bad days, and that that's all normal. That's all part of it. And I just have to keep on working to overcome the challenges. So I love this idea that having you learn how to learn better, having the ability to optimize the way you learn can have other types of effect that are much broader than that. And that if you need another reason to learn better, if you needed that, then I thought that was really a great that this idea of the kinds of things that we teach our students to learn better actually helps with their mental health as well. So I hope that, so I focused in on my class, my students at NUS, my undergraduate students at NUS, but it really applies to people throughout the workforce, throughout their entire lives. We should always be continuing to learn, and that, and by optimizing the way we learn, get us the most motivation to be able to learn, be able to get the most out of the time that we put into learning. And so this idea, so part of my passion at NUS is to really make sure that our students leave NUS equipped to be able to learn for the rest of their lives and have a strategy that's going to apply when the next hiccup. So a lot of students struggled when we had COVID and they had to go to e-learning, right? If you have an approach to learning, then you have a way of figuring out when that next thing that happens that it affects your learning, whatever that is, a epidemic or a personal issue. You have an approach and you have a variety of skills that you can use to apply to be able to learn better. And as I tried to allude to today, to actually help you with your mental health as well. So I just wanted to close this talk. I know it was a rapid fire. I know that only covered the very surface level of how you learn better. But I hope that you get a sense that it is something that is important to learn about, to know about. It's important if you're parents out there for your kids to understand. And there's a couple of ways for you if you're interested to learn more. One is that we've been teaching for the last, as I mentioned, for the last 4 years, we've been teaching the strategic learning to learn better course. We've taken a little hiatus in the last year. While in the first part of COVID, our classes got huge. And so we needed to take a little bit of a break, but we'll be returning our course in winter semester starting in January, I hope. It'll be taught out of the Yang School of Medicine at NUS. And we always keep open a number of spots open for the public. So for those of you who are interested in actually taking the course, you can do that through Skills Future. And you can email me if there's an email there. You can email me there if you can't find the course and want to know more information about it. I've also just recently published a book on the course, the materials in the course, called Strategic Learning. And so you could find that on Amazon or through our publisher. And I encourage you to stay in touch with me. You can reach out to me through LinkedIn. But if you're really interested in getting into the whole idea of the science of learning and how it gets implemented in study strategies and learning strategies, I also have an Instagram account, Robert K. Kamei, which gives study tips and learning tips. So if you come on there and follow me there, then you can get a feed in terms of learning tips. And then we also have a website called strategiclearn.org. And that's a place where we have blogs, much more longer information. We're just opened. There's going to be a forum for people to ask questions, and some activities in the book are there. So that's a good place to develop a community around learning to learn better. So with that, thank you very much for paying attention. And I'm going to stop the share now and start to answer any questions that have come up. So who's helping? Theodoric, is it you or Anna that's helping?
Yeah, so firstly, thanks so much, Prof. Robert, for the great session. Super interesting. Was quite engaging to see the ways to remember animals as well and things as well. So that was really engaging. Awesome. So we're going to do the Q&A. I think we've got a few questions that has come in. I know some may have been sent to you directly, but I'm just going to start with what's open on the Q&A. So first one is coming from Joey. Hi, Prof. Robert. Is having a questioning mindset part of thinking about thinking?
Yes, actually, I'm glad you asked that question because that's a big problem that we see in my students at Singapore. That and I think we've all experienced in conferences where you ask a question, we say, do you have any questions? And no one raises their hand. So you guys are really engaged, and I'm really happy that you already have so many questions already. And there's a number of things that are going on with this, okay? Part of it is this negative self-talk that I talked about, where students, if they're just scared, they just don't have the courage to ask a question because they're afraid it's going to be a dumb question. Even if I say no question is dumb, they will feel like they're going to be embarrassed and they just don't want to venture. They just don't, it's like they can't raise their hand to be able to join in. But if you're not asking a question and you're not failing, it's like skiing and not falling down. You're not going to make the progress of learning. Given that, I give tips to our students. For instance, I say, okay, the safe thing to do is you're taking notes, just write your questions down as you're taking notes. So we give strategies. If you're not willing to do it, I try and get them to do it. There's other ways that are safer, because the act of asking a question actually gets into the level deeper. And again, we didn't have time to talk about the study strategies. How do you then, if recognition is different than recall, what are the things that you could do to recall better? And recalling better means going deeper with your learning, asking those kinds of questions when you're engaging with the material versus just rote memory. If you're just trying to memorize it, you're not going to learn it very well. So the act of asking questions, if I were to change one thing about our students in Singapore and Asia, I would say that the educational system has failed our students by not getting them to ask more questions. And that, and whatever the reason, like I said, there's a variety of reasons why that is, but they're just not going to learn as well as if they're not able to do that. Okay.
That's a great answer. Makes a lot of sense. I do agree that asking questions and being curious does add a lot to its own learning as well. So that's awesome. Great. So we've got a good lot of questions coming in. I don't know if we can do all of them. I'm going to pick out those that have come in first. All right. One that's come in. Hi, Prof. From a transactional stress perspective, what are some of the regulatory steps a dysregulated individual can take? In this case, how can we motivate them?
Okay, so I'm not sure I understand the question very well. Can maybe the person clarify a little? So maybe Theodore, can you help me with what the question means?
Yeah, so
it means that do they need more self-regulation skills to be able to learn?
Yeah,
better?
so I'm going to do my best to kind of interpret this. So I'm thinking what this person's asking is, how can we help motivate a person who is probably unregulated in stress or in that manner, basically? How can you motivate
so there's a lot of reasons why people are not motivated well to do something, okay? And it's not necessary to know exactly, well, it is important to know the reasons for it, and there's a wide variety of reasons. But in terms of my answer, I don't really, it doesn't really matter what's the reason. People can suffer from a lack of motivation, and they can suffer from demotivation, and they're different. Okay, so and we already talked a little bit about demotivation. You know, if you don't, what are the reasons why you're demotivated? It could be you're bored. It could be that you're ashamed, or you're isolated, or there's a lot of reasons why people get demotivated, and there's a number of reasons why people have a lack of motivation, and part of that lack of motivation is procrastination. Okay, so people say, "Oh, because I'm a procrastinator, and therefore I'm not motivated." Well, if you ask my class at NUS, how many of those students are procrastinators, I'd say about 99% of them would say that they're procrastinators. So that's normal. Okay, so it's normal to feel demotivated. At times it's normal to feel like you don't have that you're lacking the motivation. Okay, and there's different techniques you use for procrastination. For instance, my favorite one is just find a way to get started. I give the students a picture of pushing a car. When you're pushing a car, the hardest part is getting it from the start. And once you get it going, you can move fast. And I find it's true for myself. If I'm procrastinating about something, if I force myself to get started, then it actually moves a lot faster. Okay, but also demotivation, as I said, in medicine, we call it a differential diagnosis. There's different reasons why you're demotivated. It could be, one of the most common ones is that we haven't set proper goals, that our goals are someone else's goals. They're our parents or societies or something, and we don't really deep inside, they're not really our goals. So so it means changing your goals. So when someone says I'm demotivated or I'm not motivated, and as I said, they're different, you have to go deeper and understand what that means. And we give our students a technique, an exercise where they can learn, how do I go deeper to really understand what's behind this lack of motivation? And that's how you attack it. There's no real magic bullet that just, for anyone who's not motivated, that helps everyone in that way. And that's part of the individualistic thing that I said you have to do to approach learning.
That's a good point. I like how you relate it towards how we procrastinate, because the truth is everyone procrastinates to some extent, right? All can relate to it. Whether or not
it's normal.
Yeah, it is very normal. Everyone does it. Even different like senior folks in leadership positions do it all the time as well. So I think it's how we deal with it, how we cope with it, and how we probably feel comfortable that there'll be downtime as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we spend an hour talking about procrastination in the class because it's such a big issue. But it's not I really want to normalize it. It's actually abnormal to not procrastinate.
That's good to know. That's very comforting to know. All right, we've got time for one final question before we wrap up the session. But so far, it's been really, really insightful. So I'm gonna pick one up, right? So one question from Han that's come in. Do you think that it is more nature or nurture when it comes towards learning strategically, or just how we think, how we learn as well?
Okay, so thank you for asking that. And that's also close to the growth versus fixed mindset. The idea that we have a fixed amount that we can learn versus, oh yeah, I can continue to learn. And I promise you that you can learn. It just takes different amount of time for different people, and it takes different strategies for different people. And most people don't know the different strategies, and so they're stuck. So for instance, I give an example in the book that, you know what, I'm not such a good language learner. I tried to learn Japanese. My heritage is Japanese. In college, I didn't grow up speaking Japanese. I tried to learn Japanese in college. I struggled. And partly is because I tried to study Japanese like I studied biology. And they were different. And so I needed different strategies to be able to learn languages, like, for instance, watching comics in a different language or singing in different language. There's a number of strategies that you can use for learning languages that I just didn't know about. And then probably the worst thing was that I did not have the courage to go into the teacher and talk to them and say, you know what, I'm struggling with learning. I need some help with how to learn this better. Post-it notes or whatever it is. I needed a strategy and I didn't have that. So I didn't do well. And at the end, I felt like, oh, I'll never learn. I'm just not good at languages. But that's actually not true. You're not going to speak like a native speaker, but you can learn language to be able to speak. Okay. And the biggest impediment, the biggest barrier to that is having a fixed mindset, feeling like you can't. Okay. So people say, I can't sing. That's not true. With lessons, people can teach people how to sing or draw. There's all these things that we're convinced that we can't do, but the research on it is that, yes, with a good teacher, you can indeed do these things that you once said that you couldn't do. But you need that instruction. It doesn't come naturally. And that's what I have to say with the course. For the students, they just didn't understand. We think that we learn how to walk ourselves, or we learn how to talk ourselves. So learning should be natural too, and that's not true. So if you want to learn more information, get the book or take our course or get on some of the other social media things to learn. And like I say, and the reason why I think Anna from Intellect asked me to talk is that this does affect your mental health. It does affect so much things broadly in terms of how you learn. It's worth it to put the time in to learn how to learn as strategically as possible.
That's perfect. I think the last one you shared was so empowering. The fact that we all can learn and change what we have been, the beliefs we have that we can or can't do certain things. I think that not just towards learning, but it strongly applies towards how we see our own mental health, right? We are this habit, we're this thing, we're that thing. But truth is, we can actually remold and change how it is as well. That's amazing. But yes, has been a great session. I've learned a lot. I think the folks tuning in have learned a lot as well. It's really engaging to see how you actually shared about strategic learning. So first and foremost, thank you so much, Professor Robert, for joining in today. For those tuning in, do check out Professor Robert's book. It's called Strategic Learning. I believe it's on Amazon. You can Google his name. He is a very, very well-known figure in this space. So do check him out. Really appreciate you taking your evening. I know you're tuning in an evening outside, so thank you for taking time. I've learned a lot.
This is great.
Yeah, awesome.
I loved how everyone asked questions. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of them.
All good. But yeah, thank you so much, Robert. I'll let you go, but have a great night, and we'll move on to the next session. Thanks so much. See you, Robert.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.